Pittsburgh Penguins went on to beat Philadelphia 7-6 on Sunday. Sidney Crosby had a goal and 3 assists. Josh Getzoff called the game, and it was a wild one, and he joins us today. Josh, I appreciate the time as always, and I got a question for you. As a guy that's called a hockey game or two in my day, did you run out of room on your score sheet in that 7-6 Pens win yesterday? That's terrible when that happens.
Yeah, hey, Rod. Good to talk to you. Yeah, this was my score sheet. Pretty much full. I only had a few more brackets left there to try to get it going. But it took me pretty much the whole way through to get everything written down there. And there was a lot of names and a lot of goals, and it went back and forth pretty much all afternoon long. But for the Penguins, it was a game they had to win, and they got it. So that was the most important thing at the end of the day.
They got to win pretty much every game the rest of the way. But let me say, do you like a game like that? I'm a goalie guy, so I like low-scoring games. How did you feel about that game and games like that?
I think from the entertainment perspective, I liked it a lot. I think from the Penguins' perspective, you would have liked to seen a little bit more constriction in their defensive side of their game. And, you know, for their flaws this year, that's actually been something that they've been pretty good at. They're top 5 in the league in goals against, at least going into yesterday. Their team save percentage is top 5 in the league. But that game was, let's just hope it was a blip on the radar as far as the goals allowed and the opportunities surrendered type of situation. But from the goal scoring perspective, Rod, I mean, I'll be honest, it was a breath of fresh air. These last few games have been, honestly, for the Penguins. They've now gotten points in 3 straight games. You mentioned Drew O'Connor scoring. You mentioned Rickard Rakell scoring. I mean, Emil Bemstrom scores in his Penguins debut yesterday. They got Marcus Pedersen chipping in and Chris Letang. It's really nice to see because obviously that 87 guy continues to produce at a ridiculous rate, but he needs some help around him. And the good news is here over the last few games, that's really started to kick in.
I don't know what it is, man. Every time you're on, I could talk to you for hours. And I try to be respectful of your time. I try to keep, but a lot of things come up. Like I heard a clip from Crosby on NHL radio this morning, and maybe you were in that scrum after the game. He said, they asked him, what is it about games with the Flyers that are just a gong show? And he goes, it's been going on since long before I was here. Right? It's obviously special every time those two teams get together.
Yeah, it's a different kind of feeling. I mean, I think that there's been a little bit of a lull the last couple of years, admittedly, probably by both sides. The Flyers were on the downswing. The Penguins obviously missed the playoffs last year. So the juice that comes with those matchups, particularly when the calendar flips in the middle of the season, it was there because it was the Battle of Pennsylvania, but it wasn't really there because of the meaningfulness of the game as it pertained to the standings or the playoffs or anything like that. Yesterday was different. I mean, the Penguins have 4 games in hand on Philly, who are currently 3rd in the Metro, and they're 7 points back. So I didn't take math after I graduated high school, Rob, but I'm smart enough to know that that means that they control their own destiny to moving into 3rd in the Metro with that win in regulation yesterday. So there was some juice in the building. There was some energy between those two teams. And I think, you know, the Flyers' credit in a year where a lot of people thought they would be irrelevant and another lottery team, they're playing really meaningful games, and they might very well be in the playoffs when the season ends. So that's kind of added a layer to this where the Penguins, as you mentioned, they're in a situation where they need to win games. They need to stack victories. So I think that kind of emphasis on the game, that energy on the game just brought a whole different kind of level of intensity yesterday. And, you know, it was a fun season series between these two teams. They split it. Penguins won 2, the Flyers won 2. And it was probably a good barometer of just how much more even these sides are than maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
We're broadcasters, so by default, we're not good at math, but we're good with words. So that's something. But, exactly. You know, Crosby, a goal and 3 assists. He looks 20. He doesn't look, what is he, 38? And by contrast, I watched Ovechkin here the other night in Sunrise, and we left disappointed. It was a half-hearted effort. He was pointless. He was -1. Whatever. Maybe it was just an off night. But there's not many nights I don't think you leave the rink going, Crosby didn't give his all. Has that ever happened?
No, very, very rarely, at least. I mean, I've been now calling the games here on the radio and the TV side for a better part of 5 or 6 seasons, but I've been around the Penguins for a decade, and between pre and post game shows and everything of the ilk, and I can honestly count on one hand the amount of times where you thought that Sidney Crosby did not give the Penguins every opportunity to push forward in a game. And maybe it was more so because of the team that he was playing against than his particular effort on certain nights. But this guy is just, I hesitate to say Mount Rushmore. I hesitate to say any of those top 5 players because his career's not done yet. But when you just look at the body of work and you look at the respect that he has from his peers, that's probably what means the most, right? Like you and I, we know how special he is. Fans understand how good he is. But when you hear guys like Brad Marchand, and I saw the quote from Trocheck at the All-Star game, and we know what McKinnon thinks about him, saying this guy is the best 200-foot player in the game still. He's the guy who young players should model themselves after. To me, that gets way more merit as far as where he stands in the game than what I think or what any of us, outside of the rink think. If the guys that he's playing against still look at this guy at 36 years old and putting up 60 points and scoring 30-plus goals and saying, wow, this guy's legitimately still one of the best players, if not the best all-around player to still do it on a consistent basis, that holds a lot of clout for me. So, I don't take any night for granted. We get to see him in action. And to your point, I think as some of these other guys of his generation, I don't want to say have faded, but have seen, Father Time catch up just a little bit, where Sidney Crosby maybe would have had that happen to him. It simply hasn't. It's his work ethic. It's his drive. I mean, that part I do see every day because I watch him every day in practice. I'm in Vancouver right now where they're going to skate here in the next little bit. And I would bet he's one of the first guys off the ice. I would bet he's one of the last guys off the ice, even fresh after, as you mentioned, that 4-point game against Philly yesterday.
I won't keep you much longer. I guess the burning question I have is how important do you think it is to Kyle Dubas to make the playoffs in year one? Because he was brought in to save the day. And because of that, do you expect him to be active here before the deadline?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, it's easy to say because we've kind of been laughing about it on the broadcast side the last little bit, that every game is the biggest game of the season, or this week is the biggest stretch of the season. With that being said, this is their biggest stretch of the season because they have Vancouver on Tuesday, Seattle on Thursday, and then a back-to-back with Calgary and Edmonton Saturday, Sunday before they go back to Pittsburgh for a 3-game homestand. So I think this trip is going to really be the barometer going into March as far as where they're at in the standings, what kind of ground, if any, they need to make up, what kind of ground is realistic to make up. And then Kyle can kind of make his decisions from there. But, to his own admission, things haven't played out how he dreamed it would. I mean, Erik Karlsson is picking up points, but there are flaws in his game that have hurt the Penguins this year. Let's just call it for what it is. I think when you look at Ryan Graves, he hasn't panned out initially to what they expected him to be in the sense of a top 4 defenseman who would eat a lot of minutes. I think Lars Eller's been a perfect addition, ditto for Noel Acciari. But Matt Nieto's been hurt. He hasn't really found his rhythm here. Riley Smith was hurt, and he's had an up and down season after a real fast start. So the pieces haven't all fit, I don't think, how he dreamed they would or how we all thought they would or hoped they would. But the good news is, like I mentioned, they're still in a position here where there is some optimism and there is some hope. I was talking to Paul Steigerwald, who we all know called Penguins games for a long time, and he said that he was at Penguins practice the other day, and Sidney Crosby kind of looked over at him and he said, we still have a chance here. And I believe that trickles down to the rest of the team. I think they really believe that they can get in and they have a chance to get in. And even though it looks like, and there is a big gap between them and the cut line right now, it can be made up with these games in hand. Of course, easier said than done when you're facing teams like Vancouver and Edmonton and Calgary in the next week. But that's the challenge. And that's going to be the opportunity in front of them here as this next week goes down and the records.
Well, it's a wonderful Penguins update. Josh, thanks for fitting us in. Appreciate it. Enjoy the West Coast.
Thanks, Rod. I'll talk to you soon.
Josh Getzoff, the radio voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins.